Hello YouTube! Today we're going to be showing you how to manage VMware ESXi and Vsphere. So, installing this operating system is very simple. You'd simply just insert your disk or your ISO file into your management console, and then you're going to install it, and it's going to ask you for your server password, and that's pretty much it. Once installed, you're going to see this screen right here. This screen gives you some basic server information such as your network details and what your CPU and memory looks like. To get into more advanced options, you simply press F2. This is where you're going to put your password in. This server has just been installed, so there's no users yet. So we're simply going to be using the root that we configured earlier, and we're going to do their password. Okay. So now we're just going to press F2 once again, and then we have our basic options. So in this case, I'm just going to show you how to set up a static IP address on your local network. So we're going to go Configure Management Network. Here we're going to go to IP Configuration, and we're going to type in our own IP address. Select different options here, you use the space bar. There we go. So that's all the configuration we need to do on the server end, so we're just going to press Escape, and then we're going to click Y for yes to apply the changes. And we're going to press Escape again, and then we're back to our normal screen. So remember this IP address. This is our IP that we're going to use to access the server and download the client. So here's our operating system that's running our client. To get to your client and download it, it's very simple. You simply open up your web browser. I suggest using IE whenever dealing with servers because they're going to be programmed with IE in mind. So as long as you use that, you know it's going to work. I've had issues with IBM management consoles not working with Chrome or Firefox, so just keep that in mind. We're going to go to our server's IP address. It's going to tell us that we don't have a security certificate. That's fine. We're going to download Vsphere and install it. I did that already to save a bit of time. There's nothing important to show you while installing it. It's a standard installation. We're going to open up our client. Oops, I went a little premature there. So here's our client. This is the IP address to the server. This is where you put your username, and this is where you put your password. If you have your ESXi set up on an Active Directory, you can also use Windows Session credentials. In the purpose of this video, we did not do that because that's a little more. That's a lot more to explain. We're just going to be doing the bare bones basics for this specific video. I would love to show you how to attach VMware to a domain, however, in a future video. So we're just going to type in root and our password. And of course, it doesn't have a SSL certificate. That's fine. You can click install the certificate and it won't ask you again. So this is your getting started guide. This is not very useful. You do have the ability to create a new virtual machine, but this is really just meant to be there for people who are just starting with VMware. If you don't want to see this every single time you sign in, you can simply click Close Tab, and that will close that tab, and then you won't see it. If for whatever reason you want to see it again, you simply go to Edit, Client Settings, and then you show Getting Started Getting Started tab right there. So this is your Summary tab. What you have here is some basic information about your server and what it's doing. In this area right here, we have the basic information about your CPUs, the manufacturer. And I'm running my ESXi in a virtual machine on VMware Workstation. And I'm doing that because this is just a tutorial and I don't really need to use a full-out system to do that. It's a lot more harder to set up, to be honest with you. So that's why my manufacturer is considered VMware Inc. And then the model is VMware Virtual Platform. Here you can see CPU information, your licensing information. So this is just a demo, and that's because I don't have to use a full version to show it to you. This is all just set up just for this specific series and nothing else. This is the amount of CPU sockets and the amount of cores per socket. So because this isn't a virtual machine, each core is considered its own socket, and I'm only running a dual core virtual machine. This is the number of NICs in your virtual machine. This is the amount of virtual machine templates you have, which we're going to cover because that can be incredibly useful if you're deploying many of the same system. Over here, this is giving you your CPU information. So it's listing the amount of usage and CPU cycles. So as you can see, it's not using up any of the CPU, and you have to remember that this computer is running inside a virtual machine. So you're really talking about a very, not a very fast server that's running the ESXi. It's just a dual core, and as you can see, it's not utilizing any of that CPU running the normal software. It really allows you to fully utilize the system in the virtual machines, and this is why I really love this software. So this is the basic memory usage. It loads the entire operating system into the RAM of the computer, so that's why it's using a gig of RAM. And that allows it to act very responsively because it doesn't have to access a hard drive. And this also can be very good if you're running your ESXi off of a flash drive or a SD card or something similar. This is the data stores, so you'll have different data stores. So in this case, I'm using one 100 gig data store, which is just a partition on the drive that I'm using to install and to run the virtual machines I'm going to be using in this series. This here is the different VM networks you have. So you can have multiple different networks and you can configure them in a billion different ways. This is my main thing I love about ESXi compared to any other software, but like Hyper-V, VirtualBox, Proxmox, all those OSs really don't offer the same amount of flexibility when it comes to the networks. It's just the amount of options. You can really set up your network exactly the way you want it. And personally, a lot of the time I use this to set up virtual networks that can be brought into the real world. So let's say I'm running some router OS routers, and I can set up different switches. I can set up all of these things, which then I could copy over to real devices, real network infrastructure, and it will work exactly the same. It's just like using a flight simulator or something in that case, and I love it. These are just to allow you to create a virtual machine, create a resource pool, which we're going to be discussing later. Enter maintenance mode, which is very important if you need to change different server-specific things inside ESXi. What this does, put it into a mode what I would consider similar to safe mode in Windows, where none of the appliances are running, but you have full access to every single resource, which you can't always access when the system is fully running. And this is just your reboot and shutdown. This is where your virtual machines are going to be. You'll have a list here. You can create a virtual machine in this tab by right-clicking and then doing it like that. One very good thing about this software relative to other softwares is that if you understand how VMware Workstation works, about 85% of the setup is going to be the same. So Workstation has its own features that are separate, but as does ESXi, but they use a very similar structure, and a lot of the options are the same. It's the same as Adobe software, where there's a certain flow to how the software works, and it's very easy for you to learn if you've used different versions or if you use different softwares made by the same company. Another thing I like about these professional organizations that create these softwares is that they really keep their flow going, and that's obviously a priority. Here we have the resource allocation, and it's exactly what it sounds like. So you'll be seeing your different virtual appliances right here, and these are going to give you an idea of how much system they're really using, if that's memory or the CPU. Of course, in this case, I just installed this, so there are no virtual machines running yet. This is your performance. So this graph here is basically just showing you the amount of CPU utilization. So as you can see, we had an event right here, which I was actually loading a virtual machine at the time. So it spiked and then it went back down when I turned the virtual machine off. That's because I've tried a couple times to make this video, so I can make it the best as possible. This is your configuration, so it usually starts there. This is where you're going to be doing a lot of the configuring for this software in general. The help status is where you're going to see all of the warnings about different components. One thing I like about software is that it really gives you a very detailed view of pretty much all the components the software can touch. This will definitely expand if you're using servers such as the IBM X series that are designed with VMware in mind, especially Lenovo and IBM servers, but I'm guessing the same with HP and Dell. You're going to have a lot of customized operating systems for each model, where they'll have very specific features that will make them work the best on that server. I was dealing with an IBM X series, I can't remember the model, and we went to the IBM site. It gave us a link to the VMware where they written a very specific version of ESXi for that server. And there weren't any real menu changes to my memory, but there were definitely software optimizations, and then we also had probably more access to different components and different warnings, which is very rarely really cool. So let's go over processors, just giving us some information about the processors. One really cool thing, there's information that gets repeated throughout the software. So that might be the CPU model or the processor speed, it might be the utilization of the processor or the memory. And the reason they do that isn't just to be kind of cumbersome. It's actually there because sometimes you need to see that information, but you don't need to necessarily go all the way back to your summary page. It just having the information on different parts of the software is actually definitely a good point for the software. It definitely can be useful. So what we can see here is the system is using apparently 18 megabytes. It's going to be the actual utilization of the software passed around. It is using up more than 18 megabytes. So I'm not exactly sure why it says that. And then we go to memory usage and it's using up over a gig. I'm not entirely sure what that's about. Here's our storage. So in this case, I only have one disk of one partition. However, you're going to have different partitions, or you can have different NASs on here, and they'll all be listed through here. That can be very useful, obviously. I would have liked it better. One thing I noticed with this is that they don't really sort them that well. What I would have liked to have is different data store groups. So you could have, different groups where you can just add things, or you can have a backup area. It's just how I prefer it. You can see these are the data stores, and this is the actual devices. And that's how that works. So that's the CD-ROM. This is the users and groups. So this is where you're going to be adding your users to your system. And then you can also sort them into different groups and give the groups permissions, or you can just use it for organization. So imagine the company you work for has two facilities, one in Chicago and one in Vancouver. You're probably going to want to have specific users. Let's say there's 2 dozen in New York and a dozen in Vancouver. You're going to want to have them separated so that when you see a certain message appear or a certain permission needed, you get an email and they don't specify or something. No matter what the situation is, you could use a million different examples. You're able to organize. That's what I really like about the groups. That's the main purpose. But I also believe you can assign specific permissions to specific groups as well. This is your events. So this is just basically a log. VMware is very adamant about pretty much recording everything that happens. This log is here. You also have a recent tasks log, which will give you all of the recent tasks done on your client. So anything you access in your client is going to be put right in here, which can be useful if you make a mistake and you need to figure out exactly what you did to make that mistake. Here's your permission. This is where you're going to have your different users and your different groups, and you're able to assign different permissions to each. So maybe you want certain users not to access a certain VM, or you want to give this person certain administrative privileges but not others. This is where you're going to be doing that. That's it for today. I just wanted to get over the basics of VMware ESXi. Later, I'm going to be getting into more complicated stuff. Quickly, we're going to be doing, if you click on my channel or if you click the annotation, you're going to be able to see exactly how to create a virtual machine. I'm going to be uploading that right next. I just wanted to get the basic orientation of how to use this software and the basic features of the interface right down flat so you can understand how to use it. Thank you very much.